It was one of those days that hits the heart of an entire sports community, the kind that forces even the most routine-driven professionals to pause. Inside the Steelers' world, and far beyond it, September 17th became a day of silence, reflection, and deep loss. Dale Lai, a name that carried weight, respect, and unmatched dedication in the realm of football reporting, passed away at the age of 56 after a long and painful battle with cancer. And while the number might sound like just a statistic for those who knew him, worked with him, or simply followed his work, it felt much more personal than that. Before we even talk about football, before we dive into anything related to coverages, game plans, or press conferences, there's a human story here. Dale was not just a colleague to many. He was a friend, a mentor, a pillar inside newsrooms and media boxes, and most importantly, a father and husband. His wife, Amy, and their 3 children now carry the weight of his absence. And for those of us who saw Dale as a part of our daily football routine, we carry a different kind of grief, the kind that comes when someone becomes a fixture in your life without ever needing to be in the same room. But if you knew Dale, or even just listened to him once, you'd know this without question. He wouldn't want this to be a eulogy. He wouldn't want a moment wasted that could have been used talking about football. He was the guy who lived for the beat, who obsessed over the small details at training camp, who never treated a Thursday injury report like it was just filler. Dale was about the work. He embodied it, respected it, and elevated it. There are reporters who cover football, and then there are reporters who live football. Dale was the latter, through and through. Rain, snow, off days, none of it mattered. If the Steelers were practicing, Dale was there. If there was a press conference, he'd be the one with the most pointed, relevant question. He didn't just show up. He showed up prepared, curious, relentless. His presence made others better because he set a standard, a high one. Inside DK Pittsburgh sports, Dale became something more than a seasoned journalist. He was the grown-up in the room when the company was still trying to find its legs. Back when DK was a scrappy startup in the mid-2010s, dreaming big and running on adrenaline, Dale brought maturity, clarity, and a sense of reality. That early team had enthusiasm, no doubt, but it lacked someone who understood structure, someone who knew what it took to build something that would last. That someone was Dale. He didn't come in to play the role of corporate guy. He came in as the committed professional who knew how to balance passion with discipline. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't chasing retweets. He wasn't throwing out hot takes just to get noticed. Dale's work stood on substance, on depth, on accuracy. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but his words always carried weight. And when you saw his byline, you knew what you were getting: honesty, insight, and a perspective that came from decades of experience. Even toward the end, when the disease made it harder for him to be present physically, Dale never let go of the job. From his bed, he kept writing, kept watching, kept analyzing. That's not just professionalism. That's love. Love for the game, for the audience, for the work itself. It hurt him deeply not to be in Latrobe for training camp. It hurt him to miss those preseason games. He didn't say it often, but those closest to him knew it. And even in those final weeks, he found ways to contribute. Not because he had to, but because it's who he was. One of the last pieces Dale ever wrote was for Steelers.com, a short column titled 5 for Friday, posted on August 29th. In it, he laid out 5 quick but thoughtful observations ahead of the Steelers season opener. And true to form, it wasn't filler. It was classic Dale, efficient but dense, concise but thoughtful. He wasn't guessing. He was connecting dots, raising points that others missed, and doing it in a way that respected the reader's time and intelligence. In that final piece, he touched on the potential of a secondary built around 3 elite coverage players: Darius Slay, Jalen Ramsey, and Joey Porter Jr. His take was optimistic but not naive. He envisioned chaos for opposing quarterbacks, with the versatility of those 3 creating mismatches and forcing turnovers. But even in his optimism, Dale stayed grounded. He acknowledged Porter's inexperience. He pointed out the health risks. He mentioned scheme limitations, the very things that have since become problems. He wasn't throwing predictions into the wind. He was mapping out the landscape, warning us of what could go wrong even while hoping things would go right. He talked about Black, a young player whose physicality caught Dale's attention during preseason. But it wasn't just about the size or the measurables. It was how Black handled the moment. Dale wrote that the game didn't look too big for him, a simple sentence that meant everything. It showed how Dale looked beyond the surface. He saw body language. He read reactions. He could tell who had the mindset to succeed. Calvin Austin came up too. Dale believed in him, not just as a slot receiver, but as a complete weapon. He pushed back on the narrative that Austin was limited. In fact, he wrote that pound for pound, Austin might be the toughest player on the roster, not just because of speed or agility, but because of resilience. That opinion might have seemed bold at the time, but watching the way Austin played in the opener made it feel almost prophetic. And of course, Dale reminded everyone not to overlook the return of Derek Harmon. A potential knee injury that could have sidelined him long-term ended up being less severe, and Dale highlighted that as a blessing. It wasn't just about who would start or sit. It was about what depth means in the NFL. What it means to have options when the inevitable injuries arrive. It was thoughtful. It was precise. It was classic Dale. He ended that piece with one line: "Let's kick this season off." That was Dale's spirit in a sentence. Always looking forward. Always rooting for the game itself to be great. The messages that poured in after his passing painted a picture of a man who was deeply respected not just for his skills, but for his presence. Listeners remembered his post-game takes, his calm demeanor, his measured responses when emotions were high. Fellow writers shared memories of debates, of laughter, of Dale being the guy who always had his facts straight and wasn't afraid to challenge yours if he didn't. Even in heated moments, he never lost his professionalism. That's what made him a rock. He didn't get caught up in the emotional roller coaster that defines so much of sports commentary. If others around him were spiraling, fans, hosts, even colleagues, Dale stayed steady. You might be angry after a loss or riding high after a win, but Dale would pull you back to reality. Not with cynicism, with clarity. That was his role, and he played it masterfully. Dale had this quiet way of letting others shine while still anchoring the room. In post-game shows, he would let his co-host vent, joke, rant, and then he'd chime in with the kind of take that just cut through all the noise. Not because he was trying to one-up anyone, just because he had that presence. He was the adult in the room, and that phrase keeps coming up for a reason. It's not about age, it's about gravity. And Dale brought gravity to every conversation. You didn't have to agree with him to respect him. That's rare in this business. His arguments weren't about being right, they were about being thoughtful. And when he disagreed with you, it was never performative. It was deliberate. You always knew he was coming from a place of wanting the conversation to be better. Even after the games, when most were just trying to get home or get their stuff filed, Dale was still thinking about the fans. He'd hop into the comments sections, reply to readers, debate with them, answer questions, not for clout, not for attention, but because he genuinely cared about the dialogue. He wanted the people who read his work to feel heard. That connection mattered to him. And that's what makes this loss so hard. Because guys like Dale don't just grow on trees. They don't come around often. He represented a kind of journalism that was about more than clicks or controversy. It was about service to the readers, to the team he covered, and to the truth of what he saw. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing the story. Always. As we pick up from that deep sense of loss, what becomes even more clear is how Dale Lai's legacy wasn't just built on the bylines or the press credentials, but on something much harder to quantify: trust. He earned the trust of readers, players, coaches, and even fellow journalists in a business where trust is often the first casualty. That wasn't something Dale ever took for granted. He protected it. He nurtured it. And he knew that with that trust came responsibility to get the story right, to tell it with integrity, and to never let the easy narrative outweigh the truth. When you think about someone like Dale, you can't separate the personal from the professional, because for him, they were one and the same. He didn't clock in and clock out of the football world. He lived in it. And maybe that's why so many people who barely knew him feel like they did. His writing had that rare ability to feel intimate without ever being invasive. You could read a Dale column and feel like he was sitting next to you, breaking down a defensive alignment or explaining a coach's decision. Not with arrogance, not with condescension, but with a clarity that made you smarter just for sticking around. What struck so many in the aftermath of his passing wasn't just how widely respected he was, but how deeply loved. The messages flooded in, not because people felt obligated to say something nice, but because they genuinely needed to express what he meant to them. You could feel the grief from fans who only knew him through headphones and screens. You could feel the pain from teammates in press boxes who had shared late nights on deadline. You could feel the weight from coaches and players who knew they could always count on Dale to be fair, even when the story was hard. He never looked to tear people down. If there was criticism in his writing, and there often was because football is messy and people make mistakes, it was never cruel. It was never performative. He believed in accountability, but he also believed in context. That's something the modern media landscape has almost forgotten how to do. Dale didn't jump on a bandwagon just because everyone else did. If he was skeptical, he told you why. If he was optimistic, he showed you the data. And if he changed his mind, he admitted it. There's a dignity in that kind of work. And dignity, as we've come to learn, doesn't always get clicks. But Dale wasn't chasing the algorithm. He was chasing the game, the truth of it, the heart of it. And that's why he mattered so much, even in an industry that often overlooks people like him. Because when someone does the work day in and day out with no shortcuts, no theatrics, just relentless professionalism and care, people notice. Maybe not at first, maybe not in viral moments, but over time, that consistency becomes a foundation. And for many fans of the Steelers, Dale was part of that foundation. The Steelers community, the real one, the one that exists beyond social media firestorms and hot takes, is made up of people who feel every win, every loss, every injury, every comeback like it's personal. Dale understood that because he was one of them. Yes, he had press access. Yes, he was on the inside. But he never lost touch with the outside. He never looked down on fans. He spoke their language. He knew when they were frustrated. He knew when they were hopeful. And he knew how to put those feelings into words without pandering or patronizing. That's part of what made his post-game presence so vital. Whether it was in a podcast, a video hit, or just a written recap, you could count on Dale to tell you what actually happened. Not just the score, not just the obvious, but the why, the how, the what it means going forward. And if that sounds simple, it's not. It takes a level of mental clarity and discipline that most people underestimate, especially after a long travel day, a deadline crunch, or a tough result. But Dale never mailed it in. Not once. Even his disagreements were professional. You'd see him in back and forths with readers in comment sections, or even on-air exchanges with co-hosts. But it was never about winning an argument. It was about sharpening the conversation. He valued debate because he valued thought. He wanted fans to think critically, to look beyond the headline, to understand the chess match inside every football game. And he was patient enough to explain it, not just once, but over and over, until it made sense to whoever was listening. That generosity of thought is what really stands out now. Because it's easy to hoard knowledge in this business. Easy to build a wall between the press and the public. Dale did the opposite. He shared what he saw, what he learned, what he believed, with humility and clarity. That's what made his voice essential, especially during complicated stretches. When the Steelers were spiraling, when decisions didn't make sense, when fans were demanding change, Dale was the one pulling people back to what actually mattered. He could see the chaos, but he could also cut through it. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. In what could be the most shocking move of the NFL offseason, whispers are swirling that Tyreek Hill, the explosive wide receiver known for his lightning speed and game-changing plays, has agreed to terms with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Sources close to the matter suggest that this deal could make Hill the biggest acquisition in the franchise's history, sparking excitement and disbelief among fans and analysts alike. The rumor has sent the Steelers fan base into a frenzy, imagining a future where Hill lines up opposite Deontay Johnson, creating one of the most feared receiving duos in the league. While the Steelers have always been known for their physical style of play and dominant defense, adding a player of Hill's caliber would signal a new era for the team, one focused on offensive explosiveness and highlight reel plays. Conversations in the league hint that Hill's signing could dramatically shift the balance of power in the AFC North, putting Pittsburgh in contention not just as a playoff team, but as a serious Super Bowl contender. Sources close to the negotiation insist that Hill's motivation to join the Steelers isn't just financial. It's the chance to redefine the team's identity and leave a lasting legacy. The timing of this potential signing is also fueling speculation. Hill, who has dominated defenses throughout his career with jaw-dropping speed and agility, reportedly sees the Steelers as the perfect platform to showcase his skills on the biggest stage. Coaches and teammates are said to be thrilled at the idea of working with him, and whispers suggest that internal discussions have already started on how to maximize his impact on the field. If true, this acquisition would not only electrify Heinz Field, but also change the way opponents game plan against the Steelers. Of course, nothing is official yet, and insiders caution that these are early rumors. But if the deal goes through, Tyreek Hill's arrival in Pittsburgh would undoubtedly go down in history as one of the boldest and most talked-about moves in the franchise's storied history. Fans are already imagining the highlight reels, the record-breaking plays, and the playoff runs that could define the next chapter of Steelers football. One thing is certain: the NFL rumor mill has never been hotter. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.